Welcome to Money First CEO, the podcast for business owners ready to run their business like a boss and make their money work smarter, not harder. I'm Harmon Johnston, bookkeeper, Profit First professional, business coach, and mum of two from Sydney, Australia. I've built a thriving business by mastering money habits and systems that create real freedom. This show will help you take control of your finances so you can build a business and life that truly works for you. Every episode delivers one powerful takeaway you can action right away for more clarity, confidence, and cash. And from time to time, I'll be joined by special guests, fellow entrepreneurs, experts, and real business owners, sharing their money wins, lessons, and insights to inspire your next move. Because when you put money first, you unlock the options and freedom you deserve. So hit follow, grab your coffee, and let's dive in. Hello there. Today I'm going to talk about profit first. I just thought it made sense that I spoke about a concept that I constantly refer to in my podcast episode and how transformational it has been in my business, and especially for those that are not familiar. If you are, great, and I'd love to hear how that's worked out in your business. But if you haven't, then this is what the fuss is about. And I would love you to explore Profit First, the book, and the concepts and share. So what is Profit First? So Profit First is a cash flow system created by an American author, Mike Michalowicz, that prioritizes profitability and owners paying themselves. It's all about allocating profits before expenses and using separate bank accounts for different financial needs. So traditionally, the accounting equation for profit was sales less expensive equal to profit. So profit always used to be an afterthought. And as business owners, you can all relate to about driving to increase your sales and then prioritizing paying everyone else. And then whatever's left is our reward for all the work. But Mike's actually flipped the equation and he has said, no, it should be sales less profit equal to expenses. So we are taking out the profit first and then we are learning to survive with whatever's left over in terms of paying others. And one of the main things about profit first and something that Mike talks about is the human behavior. And that's where Parkinson's law comes in. So he talks about that if you leave all your money in one account, it's very tempting, and it's only fair, us as human beings, that will be tempted and will spend it. So to avoid that situation, let's split the income coming in into different accounts. So then we learn to run our businesses using the bank balance accounting that we always have, where we look at the accounts and make decisions instead of just having free for all. So before I really delve into the system, I just wanted to emphasize why numbers matter. So I always say to my clients, please prioritize looking at your financials. If you don't understand, learn, because numbers tell a story. You know, if you're trying to work out what happened last month or what you'd like to change in order to change the outcome, it's very important that you look at your numbers and get a feel for how your business operates in terms of money coming in and out, and you'll be able to, assess the situation. So, if one month is not as good as another month, just put the two financials together and you'll see exactly what happened. Either the revenue was down or a certain expense was higher, and there you go. And that would just make sense. And then you know what you need to tweak in order to get to the outcome that you like to see. So traditionally, accounting has focused on numbers, but it ignores the human behavior around numbers. So it doesn't take into account impulse buying, our money mindsets that we've grown up with. And that's what Mike has leveraged in his Profit First system. So he's like, don't change the way you do things. Let's leverage it. So if business owners are making decision looking at their bank account, that's fine. Let them do it that way because that's what works for them. But let's create a system around it, not in a way of disciplining, I would say, because, we're all adults, we don't need discipline, but just in a way that it works and it makes sense. And especially a lot of business owners that are not fan of numbers. They avoid looking at numbers because they avoid knowing what the numbers are trying to tell them. And they like to make a decision on the go. This system really works. They just get it. So Profit First works with natural habits rather than trying to change them by creating a system around them. Allocating funds to different accounts remove the temptation to overspend. So how does it work? So it works by creating multiple bank accounts. So in the book, Mike mentions the 5 core bank accounts. The first one being the income account, and that's where he recommends that you have all your business income coming in. So that's the bank account that goes on your invoices. That's the bank account that's linked to your Stripe account. That's the bank account that linked to your PayPal account, and so forth. So all the money comes into the income account. And then we take a percentage of that income, depending on your Profit First implementation, or as a rough guide, you can use the percentages given by Mike in the book, or if you just Google Profit First TAPs, which is the target allocated percentages, you will get a table. So you can just start off by using those percentages to the profit account, and then you allocate another percentage to the owner's pay account, and that's for your wages, your drawings, any personal expenses that you pay from the business. And then the fourth bank account is the tax account, which some people in Australia confuse with a GST account. Look, whatever works for you. I personally use it as a company tax account, but if you'd like to combine it together with GST, that's absolutely fine. And the last bank account is the operating expense account or the OPEX account. So you can see there's an order. We've done the allocation, and that's very important. We allocate the profit first, and that's where the book's title comes in, because we are prioritizing profit. And it also flicks the switch in our brain to say, oh, I'm actually running a profitable business. And then we pay ourselves. So you can see the order and how we have flipped the equation by paying profit and the owners pay ourselves. And then we start considering about paying others, like the tax and operating expenses being the last. So like I said, in order to work out the percentages, you can just go with a guide from the target allocation percentages. But obviously every business is different, different industries, So ideally, you'd like to speak to a Profit First professional who'll be able to assess your business and what your goals are and work out the allocation percentages for you. But as a rough guide, you can start off by using the target allocated percentages. And also, regular allocation prevents financial surprises. So there's a rhythm that we do. And another thing that I always recommend my clients is to set aside a day, a week, or a fortnight, or a month that they actually do this allocation. Prioritize it, don't have it as an afterthought, I need to allocate because, I'm running out of accounts. Dedicate a day that you are going to sit down and do your allocations, and trust me, it's the best feeling. I really look forward to my allocation day, which is Friday mornings. In the book, Mike recommends twice a month, being on the 10th and the 25th. But I just say to my clients, look, whatever works for you. Ideally, you should do it similar to your wage cycle. So if you pay your wages weekly, do it weekly. So that way you'll never run out of money in your wages account, and you always have a buffer when you're paying. If you're paying wages weekly and you do your allocations fortnightly, it could work, because if your customers are paying you every fortnight, you have the big chunk of money coming in, you do your allocations, and that should last you for 2 weeks. So, it's not set in stone. It's whatever works. If you can start off by weekly, and if you're like, what, sometimes there's nothing coming in, then there's no point. And that's another thing. I had a question in one of my presentations lately where I was asked, what if, there's nothing in your income account? How can you allocate? Well, if there's nothing in your income account, there is no allocation, because that's the whole exercise. We go in, we see what's sitting in the income account, and we do the distribution. If there's nothing, then there is no distribution until the next time we do the allocations. And also transferring profit to a separate harder to access account. So I always recommend to my clients, try and create that account in a different bank so it avoids the temptation. It's harder to access, every time you log into your net bank, you can't just see the money sitting in the profit account. You have to log into a different app or you have to log into a different website. So just create some boundaries to access that, and also avoid borrowing from the profit account, because it just defeats the whole purpose of doing it. And try and find ways around it. So if there isn't enough money in the tax account or the OPEX or operating expenses account, you just need to look into why. Either there's a customer invoice that's unpaid, or you've paid a big unexpected bill, in which case you just have to see, okay, how else am I going to make through the rest of the month without having to borrow? Because it just doesn't work that way. And then, profit first gets blamed. But, there's always a reason. So it's about making a decision as to not how I'm going to pay it. It's about which account I'm going to pay the bill from. And then once you've done the allocations, you continue paying your tax from the tax account. Obviously, that's once a year if it's company tax, or once a quarter if it's BAS. And then operating expenses coming out of operating expenses, your wages will continue to be paid from your owner's pay account. And then the fun part, which is the quarterly profit allocation day. So every quarter you log into your other bank account to see how much is sitting in there. So, that is where you make the decision what you're going to do with the funds in the profit account. There's lots of different ways we can use it. One is you just transfer it to your personal account and spend it however you please. Some people like to put it in their mortgage offset, or some people like to go and spend it or treat themselves. I recommend to my clients, and something I do in my own business, is I take half of whatever's in the profit account to my personal account, and then we decide as a family sometimes how we are going to spend it. If we're going to book a holiday, or if we need to do some home improvement, or if we need to save for something, or sometimes, if there's a good time to enter the market, then we might invest. The other reason some people use the money in the profit account is to create an emergency buffer or a rainy day fund. So, we start creating a buffer. If things don't go too well, you do have something put aside that you can use. Or if your business has debt, then you can use half of that to just ideally put a big chunk into your debt and start looking at paying that off over time. Because if you pay your debt from your operating expenses, it kind of stuffs up the percentages. It can work, and you can take that into account when you're doing your allocations. But in order to really tackle the debt, the profit really helps, because usually it is a significant amount. And also, one of the other things I wanted to emphasize about Profit First, and it's not a set and forget system. You can't just use the percentages and say, yep, that's it. That's how much I can expect to pay myself, and that's how much I'm putting aside for all these things. It's flexible. It's very flexible depending on the industry, depending on your goals as a business owner. Sometimes it has to be aligned to match your lifestyle. Sometimes it has to tweak based on the business. You could have a service-based business, or you could have a manufacturing business. So the percentages have to be tweaked. And, you might even want to consider adding additional accounts. The other day I counted, I have 9 bank accounts in my business, and that works for me. They're all there for a reason, and they all make sense to me. So there's lots of different accounts that you can create to create a system around your business and what works for you. So, if you are looking at putting on a new staff member, then it's quite easy these days with low or no fees by some of the banks to just create a different bank account and pretend that you have already employed this person and start paying their wage into that account. And then that when you are ready to jump ship with the new hire, that your business can sustain it. You are still able to put aside money for profit. You're still able to pay yourself, the tax office, and all your other bills with this additional expense. Same is with, if you're buying a company vehicle. I had a young tradie once that wanted to buy a new ute, and I said, do you think you can afford it? And he goes, yeah, I've got money in my OPEX account. And I said, well, how about we create a new account and pretend that we've bought the ute and start putting the repayment in there. And in 3 months' time, we'll revisit. And I got a call a month and a half in and say, I don't have enough money to pay for my tools or my petrol. And that was the first sign to say, okay, well, something's not working. And we just realised that it wasn't the right time to buy the ute. The business was not at that position that it could afford that repayment, and it made sense, and he decided to wait. So I said, you can afford a ute, but things will have to change. Either you have to up your income, or we have to look at cutting some of the other expenses to pay for it. So, having different bank accounts helps with creating boundaries as well. So in my business, I have a team retreat account. So we have an annual team retreat. And also if I am doing a conference or a workshop that I'd like to attend, then decision making is quite easy. It's not about if I want to go, it's about, or if I can afford to go, it's about which account am I going to pay from? Do I want to pay from my retreat account? Will that have enough to cover the annual retreat? Or will I pay from the profit account? So it just makes that really easy. Also, Profit First can be used towards your personal finances. So for some of you, you would have heard about the Barefoot Investor. So similar concept, having different buckets. Or if you recall, back in the day, some of the grandmothers used to have the envelope system. So it's very similar. Money comes in, you allocate it into different envelopes. So when you go to the groceries, you use the grocery envelope to pay for those things. And then, shopping and things like that. So it can be transferred into your personal expenses as well. So the 3 steps that you can use to implement Profit First in your business. One would be start small, but start. So, like I talk about the 1% shift in one of our episodes, even if you just create a profit account and just start putting 1%, it's about creating a rhythm. Review your percentages. Like I said, it's not set in stone. If you've started paying 5% profit, it doesn't have to be 5% for the rest of your business life. It can be tweaked. And for my business, in the operating expenses, it's really tight. So every time I have to consider a new subscription, I have to look really hard if, I can afford it because my OPEX account is so tight. Yes, I can, but, it just means something else has got to give. Either I have to sacrifice my owner's pay or my profit, or I have to get additional income in order to support that expense. So review your current percentages and see if it works and aligns with your business as it grows, and tweak it and commit to a rhythm. So take out your calendars, mark a day that you are going to do your allocations and see how it works. And if it's done properly, which a lot of you will do because it's not rocket science. It's a simple system that we just get and you'll see results instantly. In 3 to 6 months' time, you will feel the transformation. When you have to pay BAS, you'll see the money sitting in the tax account. And every time you pay wages in a consistent manner, which I hope you all are, you will always have money in the owner's pay account. Now, one of the other things I wanted to talk about just before we finish off is obviously Profit First is based on American system, but us in Australia have a few different legislative things that we need to consider. One being the GST, the 10% sales tax. So in my business, I have a separate bank account for GST. So as the money comes in, I just put the 10% directly into the GST account. So when the quarterly BAS is due, the money's there. But some clients like to have it together with the tax account. So just consider that you can do either. And the other thing is the pay-as-you-go withholding, which is the tax withheld from wages, and super, which is the retirement savings for our employees. So you would like to consider creating a separate bank account for that. So when the super liability is due, the money is there. And also, a lot of my other clients like to create a separate bank account for salaries and wages. So, you have the income and then you take the GST and then you take out any direct costs. So if it's a manufacturing business, it would be cost of the raw materials, it would be cost of labor. If it's a service-based business and the staff or contractors are engaged directly to provide the service, then obviously they would have to be prioritised, their pay. And then whatever's left, which in Profit First terms we refer to as real revenue, that is the amount that we separate into or transfer into the different bank accounts. But yeah, I would recommend reading the book. The first 2 chapters, the link is on our website. Otherwise, it's available on all the bookstores or Amazon. And yeah, so that is Profit First. If it's a new concept, thanks for listening. And I hope I have explained it well. And yeah, like I said, start small, but start. And I'd love to know how it works for you. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. So thanks for listening.
Thanks for hanging out with me on Money First CEO. If you got value from this episode, hit subscribe, drop a 5-star review, and share it with someone who's building their business too. All the goodies are in the show notes, and you can find me on socials for more tips and tools to help you. Until next time, keep putting money first, and the rest will follow.